Yes, it's rolling.
Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for coming to my talk. My name is Juno, they, them pronouns, and I'm going to talk about Hegel's life and legacy to sort of put into context what we're studying. I'm going to do my best to not say anything about Hegel's philosophy because I feel like that would lead us like really far astray. Although it is kind of integrated, kind of can't talk about the history without talking about the philosophy. But I'm just gonna like do my best. So I'm just gonna focus on like, what was he like? What did he do? What was he thinking? And then after he died, like what happened to his thought? How do people argue over it? And what does it mean to us today? So here we go. Hegel, 1770 to 1831. Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Although nobody called him George. Like, if you were really close friends with him, like his wife, then it would be Wilhelm. So it's William, not George. But I think most people just called him Hegel, like the army. Okay, Hegel was born in 1770 in Stuttgart, which is the Swabian region of Germany, southeastern Germany. And his dad was like some bureaucrat, so it was like relatively comfortable life. And he received a classical education. He read like all the expected stuff like Plato and whatever, and classical education with Enlightenment principles. So that was the style at the time. Okay, fast forward. I think the first like important thing would be when Hegel was 11 years old. In 1781, Kant published the Critique of Pure Reason. And this was like a really big deal. This changed the course of philosophy like immensely. It's compared to Copernicus. Like before Copernicus, you have like the Ptolemaic model, and then after Copernicus, it's like the sun is in the center. People are like, oh, and like see everything so differently. And when Kant published this work, it sort of kicked off a lot. It like changed the direction of philosophy. And a lot of the philosophy, especially in Germany at that time, was trying to like respond and figure out like what Kant meant with this work. He kept publishing stuff like the Critique of Judgment, but Der Kritik der reinen Vernunft is the real, I don't know, it's the best one. Let's see. So that's a little bit of like context. I feel like besides Hegel, Fichte, and even before Hegel, Fichte was the main person that had like a philosophical response to Kant, which is basically just like, you know, Kant's this is amazing, this is so good, these insights are so compelling, but you say a lot of stuff that's just obviously so wrong, and so like how do we like take the good stuff and like leave the bad stuff? But Fichte was sort of the first one to have this like proto-dialectical response to Hegel, like the I posits itself and then it posits the opposite of itself. It's sort of like dimly Hegelian. Anyway, let's go back to Hegel's life. All right, so Hegel turns 18 and he is sent to the seminary, which just was the best place to get an education at that time. I don't think that Hegel wanted to be a priest. He was, at this point in his life, very critical of religion. So he's just like, went to seminary because it was state-funded education. But he sort of rebelled against like the oppressive atmosphere. Like Hegel loved to drink with his friends and talk about philosophy. I feel like that's super relevant for this group. Like we're definitely carrying in the tradition of like staying up late and like talking about big ideas. It's like Hegel and his roommates didn't have like a lot else to do, and then just like, especially at 1789 after the French Revolution, they're like really excited. There's political happenings in France, and they like loved what they were seeing. There's this story that's probably not true that they like in the middle of the night they planted a freedom tree and like all danced around it and sang La Marseillaise. Yeah, which is fun. I don't care if it's not true.
Awesome.
That's a great story. Yeah, and for the rest of his life, every July 14th, Hegel toasted to freedom on Bastille Day. So yeah, when Hegel was at seminary, his two roommates, his like drinking buddies and like philosophy partners, turned out to be like two other extremely influential and important philosophers. So that would be Hölderlin, who is like a poet, but you know, like Goethe, sure he's a poet, but like he's very philosophical in the way that he like communicates his art. Hölderlin, and Schelling. And so those people like really sort of fused their thoughts and their ideas, and they probably wouldn't have been the same without that like intellectual discourse for 7 years? No, he graduated seminary in 1793, so 5 years. It's a long time. Okay. Upon graduation, Schelling and Hölderlin Schelling more than Hölderlin, but they pretty much became famous and influential and like achieved success. Hegel and Hölderlin are the same age. Schelling is like 5 years younger than Hegel, and he just like skyrockets to like this chaired professorship at like age 22, something ridiculous, like ridiculously precocious. He's just like the boy wonder. He's got his Schellingian philosophy, and like people are really taking note. And there's Hegel, graduated seminary, and like he has to take a job as like a Hofmeister, which is just, Hofmeister means like master of the farm, something like that. But it's not really master of anything. It's just a tutor for like rich kids. And so that's what he did for a number of years, was just bounce around. He started out in Bern, and then he moved to Frankfurt. Hölderlin found him a job with a different like rich family in Frankfurt, and he just spent that time not really achieving success. Just like feels frustrated that his friends are like great, but Hegel wanted to be great. So let's see. Next important thing, I think in 1795, when Hegel was 25, he started seriously studying Kant. And the same year he publishes this work, The Positivity of the Christian Religion, something like that. And this work is like shows his like infatuation with Kantian morals and philosophy, and his critique of Christianity. It's just like, it's actually really funny. I haven't read the whole thing, but it's basically like a fan fiction of the Bible, where Jesus becomes Kant and like and goes around and preaches like the categorical imperative. Hilarious. I just love that. That's so funny. But the point is that Hegel really sort of took it upon himself to like join the age of philosophers and respond to Kant. It's definitely the biggest, most important thing to do at that time. Let's see. This will become important later. In 1798, Fichte was accused of being an atheist, and he was fired from his professorship. It was like really flimsy. It was like he was allegedly didn't believe in God. He didn't like profess anything, but it was like a pretty repressive time, and people wouldn't stand for atheism. So Fichte got canned, and I think like a couple of years later, Schelling took his place. Which is interesting. Anyway, yeah, that will become important later. In 1799, Hegel's dad dies. Hegel didn't really like his dad. He doesn't really write anything in his letters about his dad. He writes a lot about his mom. So he loves his mom. Yeah, do with that information what you will. But anyway, the point is that his dad left him like an inheritance, and so he has like an extra chance to pursue his philosophical career, and he moves to Jena, where he stayed for a while. During the period at Jena, he was an unpaid lecturer, so he would just like lecture on philosophy and then pass the hat around. Still not very successful at all, but at least he was teaching. And during this time, I think he was also living with Schelling. I think Schelling was like paying for his rent. But during this time, he writes in 1801. He writes a work, "The Difference Between Schelling and Fichte's Philosophy," basically giving his take on these two philosophies and then coming out on the side of Schelling. Hegel thought Schelling was great, but at this point in his life, he tried to begin to formulate his own systematic philosophy that was different from Schelling's. So like they're probably very similar because of all of their intellectual exchange, but he's sort of tried to sense that he had his own thing to say. And starting around then, he begins to try to formulate his own theory. And he does it for like 5 years. He's like writing what will become the Phenomenology of Spirit, writing it again and again, and then he would be like, stop, like, oh, there's some fatal error, and like he wouldn't edit, he would just throw it out and start writing it all over again. Kind of perfectionist-y. But I think that especially considering the nature of his philosophy, he was really developing his method. Like Hegel's trying really, really, really hard to not make any logical mistakes. Like everything that comes after that thing should be logically implied by the dialectic of whatever came before. And so like I feel like if he finds an error, he's just being honest about what his philosophy is. And so yeah, I think that's also really courageous and respectable, because he could have published something with errors and then he would have had a book, and he knew that if he had a book then he would be able to have like an academic career. Like he would get a lectureship and begin to pursue like his dream of like being an influencer and like having great, recognition. But he didn't. He just sort of went over and over again the Phenomenology of Spirit. By 1806, it's getting really desperate. In the winter of 1806, Hegel, a lot of you might know this already, he knocks up his landlady. So he has like this bastard child on the way, and he still doesn't have a job. So he really, really needs to finish his Phenomenology of Spirit. And he has some contract with a publisher. And the way it ends up happening, he believes that once he gets to the spirit section, at the end of chapter 5 on reason, then you derive the concept of spirit. Hegel thought that was going to be the end. But following his method, like the philosophy sort of takes on a life of its own and says like, we're not done, we still have more to do. And so he's just trying to like essentially like take dictations from this like system that sort of becomes greater than him. And so if you look at the table of contents of the Phenomenology of Spirit, it's whack. It's totally wild. Like, chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is like relatively straightforward. It's got like the tripartite structure. But once it gets to spirit, then it's like AA in parentheses, BB in parentheses. But it also continues like chapter 6, chapter 7. So it's not clear if that's like a linear series of concepts, or if the rest of the concepts that come after spirit are like a subset. Like, is there an indent, or is it a series? Which, laughing, but that has a lot of implications for the interpretation of the theory. And because it was like so haphazardly written, like he's writing chapter 1, sends it off. Writing chapter 2, sends it off. Like, he didn't really have a chance to go back and edit those things. So there's a lot of questions about what he meant because of the circumstances of this publication. There's like 3 different titles. I found this ad. There's this advertisement that he wrote for the Phenomenology of Spirit, like after it came out, and he calls it The System of Science, Part 1, The Phenomenology of Spirit. And there was never any Part 2, so like that got revised. But in the introduction, he calls it The Science of the Experience of Consciousness.
Yeah.
And then on the front it says Phenomenology of Spirit. So all this speaks to the kind of unedited nature of the book. The most dramatic thing that happened was on October 14th, 1806. He finishes his manuscript. He wrote the preface last. He wrote the preface last. For all you people who try to read the preface first, okay, I disagree. I think you should read the preface last. Because he wrote it last.
You can blame me. I'll take all.
Yeah, I just, okay, I need to register my disagreement. You should read the introduction first. That's what he wrote first. So if you want to follow his line of thinking, then it makes the most sense to read the whole book and then read the preface. Because then you're going to understand. I think it puts you in a much better position to understand what he's saying. Anyway, so he writes his last manuscript and he sends it off to the publisher. But at that exact same time, Napoleon is invading the Holy Roman Empire. It's not Germany yet. What will become Germany. And the town of Jena is like totally destroyed. Cannons, like, they destroy the university. They destroy his apartment. Like, his life is like torn apart. But Hegel's like very excited that this is happening. And like, there's that really famous quote that he like saw Napoleon out on reconnaissance. I saw the world spirit. I don't have it memorized. The gist of it is like, oh my God, the causality of the world has all been concentrated into like one person. Not that like he is the one that's doing it, but like the cunning of reason chooses this man, and he's just like in awe. And why did he think that was such a big deal? It's because Napoleon was like exporting the ideas of the French Revolution to the rest of Europe. So Hegel saw that revolutionary spirit, and he saw it coming to his homeland. And for him, that was more important than like his apartment and his university. So anyway, he publishes Phenomenology of Spirit. He sends it off to Schelling. He's like, hey Schelling, check this out. And Schelling, I think like didn't respond for like 6 months. He like ghosted Hegel. Hegel's like, hey, did you read it? Oh, I haven't gotten around to it yet. But in reality, Schelling, I think, did read it and was like terribly, terribly insulted by that black cow line, the night in which all cows are black. Hegel meant that as a critique of the people that were following Schelling and like misinterpreting him. He was supposed to critique those people. But Schelling took that as an attack on his philosophy, and it totally destroyed their relationship. They were never friends again. That's not true. They became like casually friends, but they never talked about philosophy ever again. Like their letters stopped, or they didn't stop. But their relationship was destroyed, and that's sad. What's up? A little bit bitchy. Yeah. The reviews of the Phenomenology were, I want to say mixed, but in reality it was probably not very well received. Criticized mostly on its prose style. Were you surprised by that? No. But I did find some positive reviews. Some people wrote privately to him and said, like, this is amazing. Once I understand this, I'll really get the insights that you're saying, and I'm so excited by that. I had to really dig, but like some people immediately recognized that this was a monumental, great work. And amongst Hegel scholars today, either people think that it's the Phenomenology of Spirit or the Science of Logic that's like his, what do you say, shade of something, great work.
Magnum opus.
Huh?
Magnum opus.
Magnum opus. Okay, but it didn't really skyrocket his career. He had a book, but he still had to like bounce around and do random shit. His friend Nietheimer got him a job editing a newspaper at Bamberg for like 2 years. and then he became like a high school philosophy teacher in Bavaria, or he was actually the director of all of the education in Bavaria. And it's during this period of time where he writes his Science of Logic, 1812, 1813, 1814, when he was 42-ish. He publishes the Science of Logic, like as he's teaching high school students his philosophy, which didn't work out very well because it's like very high level philosophy, and Hegel didn't want to dumb it down. He was like, I need to raise them up to the level. I'm not going to dumb down my philosophy. But yeah, if anyone's taught high school students, they don't. Yeah, no comment. Anyway, okay. Next thing that happens after he publishes the Science of Logic, he finally gets a professorship at Heidelberg in 1817 when he's 47. So like, that's a long time to go in your life and just be a failure. But finally, he gets what he wants. He wanted to get married. He got married at age 41, and then now he gets a professorship at age 47. So like, it took a while, but
He married the landlady?
No, no. He married some 20-year-old, yeah, some like rich 20-year-old daughter, and had like 2 kids, and like his wife hated his bastard. His bastard was named Ludwig, and there was just a really tense, as you can imagine, like tense relationship there. But eventually, he did incorporate his bastard child into his family. Where was I? Heidelberg. Yeah, success. Right after he got posted at Heidelberg, he gets an offer at Berlin University. This is like the Columbia. This is the place where you want to be. Did I choose the wrong university?
Yeah. No one wants to be in Columbia.
This is the Princeton.
Yeah, sure.
This is the Harvard of Germany at the time. It was founded by Wilhelm von Humboldt in 1806 on like Enlightenment principles. And I don't know exactly when, but eventually he rises up and he like is the director of all of the philosophy department. 5 minutes? Okay. Let's see, what else is important? Yeah, basically at this point, Hegel has achieved what he wanted. With his like major position in the university, his ideas spread, and he becomes like well respected and incredibly influential. I would say the most influential philosopher of all time, but maybe a smaller claim is like the most respected philosopher to like respond to Kant. After Hegel, people stopped trying to create a system that's better than Kant's system. They don't do that anymore. He did end philosophy in that respect. Yeah, at this time, 1821, he publishes the Philosophy of Right, which is another major work. All of his other works, the Philosophy of History, the History of Philosophy, the Lectures on Aesthetics, and the Lectures on Religion, were published after he was dead by like students gathering together notes. So he didn't really have anything to do with those things, but they are very widely read. But I think there's a lot of plausible deniability in, do you take perfect notes? No. So like, that's what we're dealing with here. There's like a little bit of a gap. Anyway, okay, let's move on. After Hegel died, the school splits between left Hegelians and right Hegelians. This is really important for understanding where Marx comes from, because Marx is a left Hegelian, also known as a young Hegelian. Basically rejects Hegel's religious, just basically wants to take this system, get rid of the religion, use it as a tool to analyze politics. Right Hegelians, okay, I'm a right Hegelian, so I will just say, like, they're more faithfully interpreting Hegel. Like, they like what he does in terms of reconciling religion and philosophy, and they just want to keep doing that. But they did kind of die out. They're not really important, but I think that's where I play my flag. Oh, hi, Carl. Let's see. In 1841, the Ministry of Culture asks Schelling to like stamp out the scourge of Hegelianism amongst the minds of the Prussian youth.
The dragon seed of
The dragon seed of Hegelian pantheism. And perfect guy to ask, right? Because Schelling hated Hegel. And
Hegel's dead at this point.
Hegel's dead for 10 years. But yeah, and they're like, we need to get rid of this. This is too dangerous. No one can control this. The Prussian government didn't know whether to censor the right Hegelians or the left Hegelians. Didn't know which one was more dangerous. So they just said, we need to do away with all of this. They said, Schelling, you need to beat down on Hegel. You need to tell everyone why Hegel was wrong. And he did a series of lectures that were like, oh, my Schellingian philosophy is better than Hegel's philosophy because Hegel confuses the categories of existence and essence. Okay? I don't think so. And neither did the people in the lectures. Like the attendance dwindled, and it didn't work. Hegel remained the dominant mode of thought. But in these lectures, there's three notable people. Kierkegaard, who passionately hated Hegel, who critiqued Hegel a lot. I think mostly uses the same critique that Schelling did. So it's like influenced Kierkegaard's thought. Also in attendance, Bakunin. I'm just gonna leave that one. And Engels. So the way Marx and Engels like approach Hegelian philosophy, I would argue, is influenced by these Schelling lectures, which are like, it's not so much Schelling teaching Hegel as it is like Schelling attacking him. And I think that's reflected in the way that they understand. All right, there's more, but I think that's enough. So thanks for. Oh wait, does anyone have any questions?
We have like.
Can you?
How did he get the professorship at Berlin, and then how did he become head of the department before his career kind of took off?
I think with the publication of the encyclopedia. I don't think I talked about that, but in 1818 he publishes his encyclopedia, which relatively easy to read, and it outlines his entire philosophy, logic, nature, and spirit. That's when he's really able to communicate his ideas. I think that was primarily responsible. That's when his career really takes off, is the encyclopedia. More questions, Alice?
Do you know what like his enlightenment traditions actually include? Because
What?
like when he studied philosophy, and you said he trained with Plato, Aristotle, and like the classic training, and some also the enlightenment like spirit or the
Yeah.
enlightenment tradition. Do you know like what is actually the people from enlightenment who was trained? So like
You mean who?
who in the early modern time have he studied or have he actually mentioned a lot?
Spinoza.
Spinoza. Oh, okay, yeah.
Hegel is like I think he was ashamed of it, but he writes that like anyone who's a philosopher is a Spinozistic.
Yes.
Okay.
Leibniz. He talked a lot about Leibniz.
Oh, that's interesting.
And
Having recently been reading Leibniz, I can really see it.
yeah.
It's,
Yeah, I
it's
can see
a
the
lot of it.
connection from Leibniz. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, everyone did. He's a very comprehensive guy.
Other people were raising their hands, yeah?
Oh, just real quick, remind me how old he was when he wrote the Phenomenology of Spirit?
He was
He started at 30, right?
37.
But he
37.
started at
Oh,
like
from
20.
age 31 to 37.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's your sense of how his like greater success in proximity to the Russian state if that
Thank you for asking that question. Yeah. I don't want to grandstand here, but like Hegel was not close to the Prussian state. The Prussian state was incredibly sensorial and like cracked down, like fired Fichte, right? That was just the beginning. Like, they like imprisoned his TAs. They like imprisoned his students. Hegel was a liberal. Hegel was a liberal. There were no leftists at that time, so like that was the radical position. That was as far left as you could be. In the 1870s and the 1880s, Hegel gets appropriated by the reactionaries they're the one that say, oh, Hegel is the philosopher of Prussian absolutism. The philosophy of right is saying that the Prussian government is the best. That's total nonsense. Another thing I have to just rebut. Hegel has nothing to do with Nazi philosophy. This is another thing that's just thrown at him with no base. Like, not a single. Who's the smart Nazi? Carl Schmitt, right? Carl Schmitt hated Hegel. Heidegger doesn't. Heidegger critiqued Hegel. Did not think highly.
They all despise the dialectic method.
Yeah, not at all conservative, not at all absolutist, and not at all Nazi.
I had heard, and I'm presuming, based off what you said, that it's totally yes, but I had heard that Mussolini was slightly inspired by misreadings of Hegel's historical thought, and that was in part an influence for
That's plausible because Mussolini used to be a socialist, right?
I mean, also if you kind of get down into the mythology that Hegel crafts, you can kind of reconstruct a story about how all the diversity and the difference and the messiness of life is ultimately sublated into absolute spirit. And it can sound conservative when you just look at it at face value without thinking about it at all.
Right,
And everything comes together.
Right.
That's conservative.
Yeah.
And someone the person telling me this, also said, even Mussolini knew what he was pulling from this was not strictly Hegel. But then again, I also heard that Hegel was pro-Prussian state, so...
Not at all.
Yeah.
He was afraid. He didn't, it would have been easy for him to be the Russian state is so great.
He was
To just-
pro-state. He was actually saying good things in the
in the
philosophy of right, but
philosophy of
it's
right-
not for.
Wait, you
the
have to be
Prussians.
really careful.
Yeah.
And this is what I said I wasn't going to do.
Yeah.
But in the philosophy of right, Hegel is not prescribing anything.
Sure,
He's
yes,
not
that's-
saying this is good.
Yep.
He is describing the current state of politics. That's pretty easy to misconstrue into an endorsement, But it's
Yeah.
it's specifically not that. And he makes that really clear in the preface or the introduction, at the beginning of the philosophy of right. Yeah.
What was Schelling and Kierkegaard's big bugaboo about Hegel?
They thought that Hegel made presuppositions, that he's using some
is relevant for
Trojan
Jay.
horse. At the beginning of the Science of Logic, Hegel claims, I am starting from nothing. First category, nothing.
First part is just being.
But being is nothing.
I know. But just to be clear.
And there's this essay at the beginning, with what must the beginning of science be made? And he concludes in this this essay right before the beginning of the Science of Logic that the only way to start doing science is to cast off all of your presuppositions, to be an absolute skeptic, to question every single thing, to negate all of the things, and then to negate skepticism. And once you do that, you're left with literally nothing. And that's where you start. And Schelling and Kierkegaard thinks you have to make a leap of faith, right? Kierkegaard thinks you have to just take the first step with no good reason to do it. And then I would say he reconstructs a system that's similar to Hegel's. But the beginning is crucially different. Hegel thinks you can derive this in your armchair, basically, with no evidence from the world.
I disagree with.
The Science of Logic is a priori.
No, but the science of logic it can only be a priori because the phenomenology came first. Oh, I mean, this is didactic, but, let's, I don't want to bore people. Carl, last question.
Yeah, well, it's more, I think we're getting question or not,
I do. Yeah.
Not in the sense of
I agree with that. I wholeheartedly endorse that conservatism.
Actually, to segue into the point for today,
Thank you.
oh my God.